Well, Ed, thank you for your very kind words. And next time you're in D.C., I hope you'll come visit us, and that goes for everybody, too. There's a lot of work that we have to do, and I'm so glad to be on a team where we're working together for the cause we share. Now, for the next 20 minutes, though, I promised Mandy that I would talk about diabetes, because it is a condition that we thought of as something we couldn't do much about. Now, I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota, as Ed mentioned. My dad was in the cattle business, and his father and his father and his father, as far as I can trace. And my dad did not like raising cattle, so he left, and he went to medical school. And he came back, and he spent his career as the diabetes expert for much of North Dakota and western Minnesota. But I never once heard him say that anyone ever got better. The disease was one that you sort of managed, and you tried to slow down the progression. And people would say, it's a progressive disease. Once you got diabetes, you'll always have diabetes. And when I went to medical school, I thought that's the last thing I want to get involved in. But we've learned a few new things. And I have to say, it's now become one of the most exciting things, because it's something that you can turn around in a dramatic way and really change people's lives as long as they know what the secrets are. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. Now, patients come into my office and they'll say, I've been doing great. I'm really following the diabetes diet that I learned, and I'm not eating any bread. And what they mean is they learned at some point that diabetes means you got too much sugar in the blood. Sugar comes from carbohydrates, so don't eat bread, and don't eat potatoes, and don't eat cookies, and don't eat cakes, and don't eat sweet potatoes, and don't eat pasta or rice. But it's interesting, if you take a look around the world, take a look at Japan, where you have very thin people, not much diabetes. What's the dietary staple in Japan? Huge amounts of rice for breakfast and lunch and dinner. And if you look in adults over the age of 40, before 1980, diabetes was rare. It was 1 to 5% of the older population. But what happened in Japan right around 1980? McDonald's, KFC, all these kinds of things. These are not traditional Japanese foods, but they became very popular. And the fat, can you see this? The fat content of the diet went way, way up, and the carbohydrate content went down. In other words, they were eating less rice than before, more greasy stuff. And by 1990, diabetes was 11 to 12%. This shows us two things. Number one, rice does not cause diabetes. Number two, diabetes is not primarily a genetic illness. Because if it were, these numbers really wouldn't change. So we could take a lesson from the United States. Back in 1909, we had a meat-based diet. The average American ate 123.9 pounds of meat per year, not a rice-based diet, and it only got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And as of 2004, we hit an all-time peak of 201.5 pounds of meat. The big increase, by the way, what was it? Pork? Beef, chicken, exactly. Americans eat 1 million chickens per hour. Let me say a special word of condemnation for cheese. 70% fat, very high in cholesterol, high in sodium. If it were any worse, it would be Vaseline. We didn't eat very much of it back in 1909, 3.8 pounds per person, but we learned that through pizza especially, and fast foods, we can eat a lot of this stuff, more than 30 pounds per person per year. And if you look at what happened to the diabetes map, this is less than 4% of the population has diabetes. This is more than 6%. That's 1994. Here's 95, 96, 97. And the map just gets worse. As the diet changed, diabetes comes roaring in. Now, I'm going to change the color scheme so we can zero in on specific counties, but it's, as you can see, it's continuing to get worse. Okay, well, who does better? When you look at Seventh-day Adventists, they've been under the microscope for a long period of time because church teachings say you should not drink alcohol, and don't smoke cigarettes, and avoid caffeine, and don't eat meat. And almost all Adventists are pretty good at the first three. But some are eating meat and some aren't, so that sets up a natural experiment. And in 2009, the American Diabetes Association published these data. Are you familiar with BMI, body mass index? It's just your weight, but it's adjusted for how tall you are, and if you're healthy, it should be below 25. But the meat-eating Adventists had a BMI of 28.8. The semi-vegetarian, meaning meat less than once a week, a little bit thinner. Pesco-vegetarian, what's that? Okay, fish, but no other meat. A little bit thinner. Lacto-ovo-vegetarian, thinner, but who's this group? I always have to tell my patients that a vegan is not someone from the planet Vegas. The only group smack in the middle of the healthy range, and if you look at diabetes, it's the same. Meat eaters have a lot, vegans have very little. So our research team brought in a group of overweight people, 64 women, postmenopausal women. Everyone had been on Atkins and South Beach and Nutrisystem and everything else, and we said, forget that, just 2 rules. No animal products, and no added oils. Very simple. They could eat all the foods that they wanted, no exercise. It was a 14-week study. We asked them to eat from the power plate, which is a diagram that we developed a number of years ago to show the healthy food groups. So that might mean blueberry pancakes for breakfast, or a chunky vegetable chili for lunch, or for dinner your linguine might be topped with artichoke hearts and oyster mushrooms, but not meat, not dairy products, not eggs. And at 14 weeks, the average person had lost 13 pounds, and their waist was 2 inches thinner, and their insulin sensitivity, which we measure with a glucose tolerance test, was better. And we tracked them for 2 more years. They never put the weight back. So NIH then said, okay, that's pretty impressive. We'll give you a grant if you'll do the same thing in people with type 2 diabetes. So low-fat vegan diet versus the American Diabetes Association guidelines, and it was a 22-week study with a 1-year follow-up. And what we track is hemoglobin A1C. This will not be on the test. But this is a measure of blood sugar control. And it improved on the ADA diet, but it just improved immensely on a plant-based diet. This is better than any oral diabetes medication. LDL, bad cholesterol. It won't surprise you. You're not eating any animal fat. You're not eating cholesterol, so your LDL drops like a stone. And this is Vance. Vance was a police officer whose father was dead by age 30. Vance was 31 when he was diagnosed with diabetes, and he lost 60 pounds over about a year on a vegan diet. He stopped all of his diabetes medication. His A1C was 9.5 to start, which is terrible, and it fell to 5.3, which is normal. In other words, if he could walk into any clinic in the world and they would not diagnose him as ever having had diabetes. And when we got his results, he was one of the first patients we'd ever had where the diabetes was just flat out gone. And we really debated, could I tell Vance that he didn't have diabetes? Because we found that dietitians and others would get upset with us for saying that. But we've become quite used to saying it now, and diabetes is a reversible condition. This is Nancy, same story. She lost about 40 pounds over the course of a year. She stopped her diabetes medications. Her A1C fell. She still has diabetes, but she's much better than she was before. But the reason I'm showing you this is one day she was cooking spaghetti, and she poured the spaghetti sauce into a casserole, and she just stopped. She looked at her hand. She had rheumatoid arthritis, but she had opened up that vacuum-packed jar that must be made by sadists, because if you have a little joint pain, you can't open the darn things up. She had opened it with no problem. And she thought, where did my arthritis go? And her arthritis was gone. It was about the time she started this plant-based diet. Now, that's another lecture, but arthritis is an inflammatory condition that is triggered by certain proteins that you eat. In many cases, the most common is dairy. And how much dairy protein is in a vegan diet? None. So your arthritis in some cases goes away. All right, my most important slide. For any medical people or anybody, I want to show you the cause of type 2 diabetes. This is a muscle cell. And if I stick a needle in my arm and I pull out a muscle cell, it's sort of spindle-shaped like that. And here's glucose. The glucose is there to power the cell. Glucose is good. It's like gasoline for your car. Glucose powers your cell. But it has to get in. Now, to get in, it needs insulin. Insulin is a hormone. Here it's a little key that goes into that lock, and that signals the glucose to be able to come into the cell. All right? So that's what's supposed to happen. But there's something else inside that cell. When I was a kid, there was a practical joke people would play. They would put chewing gum in your front door lock. I hope you didn't live in a neighborhood like that. But when you get home, you discover even a perfectly good key will not open that lock. And so rather than crawl in and out the window for the rest of your life, you have to call the locksmith and clean it out and so forth. Well, you don't have chewing gum in your cells, but what you do have is fat. Beef fat, chicken fat, olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, fish fat, all kinds of stuff. Doctors hate words like fat because it only has one syllable, so we call it intramyocellular lipid, but it's fat inside the cell, and it came from foods that you ate, and that's how it got in there. But no doctor, and I mean, people do not explain this to patients, and for good reason, because nobody knew this. But with MR spectroscopy, I can show the fat that's built up in your muscle cells, and you can be 15 years old, rail thin, but if your cells have built up with fat, that's a sign that you're headed for insulin resistance and ultimately diabetes. So it has nothing to do with the bread or the rice or the potato or all this nonsense. That was never the cause of it. That was never the issue, all right? Now I'd like to talk to you about your car insurance. Geico's national headquarters is right near our office. They got 2,500 people there, and they are hemorrhaging with health care costs. So we instituted a vegan diet at Geico, and it was a little bit new for the cafeteria manager at first to understand what that really meant. But it worked out very well, and all we did, it was very simple. We did two things: vegan food in the cafeteria and a vegan support group. So once a week you could sit down at lunch and talk with other people. It was really, really simple. And we had a comparison site in Fredericksburg, Virginia that did not get the program. They didn't lose any weight there, but at our place they lost weight very nicely, and their waist circumference fell. And so then we did it in 10 cities across the country, at Dallas, Tucson, San Diego, all sorts of places, all at these different Geico sites. And the same thing happened. They lost weight very nicely. If they had diabetes, they got better. This is Hillary and Bruce, two of the participants who came every week. And my instructors would come back to the office and say, you know, those people at Geico, they're terrific. They're so motivated. They're so enthusiastic. They're so engaged. Except for two of them. There's Hillary and Bruce. They come every time and they act like it's a party. They just sit in the back and they talk and they chat and they look into each other's eyes and they distract everybody, and I don't know why they come. And every week I kept hearing complaints about Hillary and Bruce. Well, you know what? You can misjudge people. And Hillary and Bruce did talk a lot, but what they were talking about was the foods they were going to pick up at the store on the way home, the new vegan recipes they would make, how they would do a vegan Thanksgiving, how they would get their families involved. They were totally into it. And a year later, Bruce sent me this picture. And Bruce has lost 85 pounds. Hillary's lost 85 pounds. Bruce has lost 100 pounds. And they also discovered when you set down your luggage, you've got energy. And they started exercising, and they sent me this picture when they ran their first half marathon. So you can do it. The last thing I just want to talk about really quickly. When we talk about healthy diets, you'll get into discussions about what should we be eating? You know, what's the natural diet? Aren't we sort of paleo people wearing loincloths and carrying around spears and chasing mammoths? Isn't that kind of the thing? If you look on the cave wall, they have drawings of kind of wishful thinking that we might be able to hunt successfully. Well, if you look around at the other great apes, like it or not, humans are great apes, along with chimpanzees and gorillas and orangutans and bonobos. And great apes are either entirely or exclusively plant eaters. They are not out there doing lots of hunting. And scientifically, we can prove that we are herbivores. Do you know the dental test? This is science, people. Do you know the dental test? What you do is you wait for your cat to yawn. And you notice that your cat has these big, long, and canine teeth that are there to tear apart prey. And then you look in your mouth, and you discover that your canine teeth have withered away, and they're not any longer than your incisors, and that change occurred at least 3.5 million years ago. And try eating roadkill. It's really a challenge. Okay, all right. Do you know the bunny test? This is science, the bunny test. Okay, you take a bunny. You put the bunny in front of your cat, and you discover that your cat can be 6 months old, but your cat has to eat that bunny. And then you put the bunny in front of your toddler, and your toddler will say, "Bunny." And not in a million years will your toddler say, "I will eat him." And even an adult human, if your cat sees an injured bird, that his wing is broken or something, your cat is going to go, "Okay, this is going to be an easy one." But never in a million years would you say, "Bring me some mayonnaise." That doesn't happen. We are naturally not inclined to eat animals. It is entirely culture. It is entirely learned. Okay? Do you know the box test? You take a box. The box had a computer or some other electronic device in it, and you go in amongst the little packing things in there, and you pull out this silica gel. And we see some wisdom here. The silica gel company they're very familiar with human behavior. That people put anything in their mouths. So even though you know that it's there to just take humidity out of the box, they have to write these words on it: "Do not eat." So what does this tell us, people? It tells us that human beings are naturally herbivores, but we're very easily thrown off track. And so we have to be reminded what a healthy diet really is. Dogs have a very sensitive nose. They can sniff out bombs. They can sniff out drugs. They have ears that are very, very acute, and this allows them to detect prey at great distance. Now, human beings have noses and ears that are very cute, but we can't really detect prey at great distances, and that's okay, because you don't have to sneak up on a strawberry. Okay, very simple. So how did all of this start? How did we get off track? And I asked the paleoanthropologist Richard Leakey, I said, how did people become carnivores? And he said, well, first of all, we are not carnivores and never have been carnivores. The fact that some people eat meat and have tried to pretend to be carnivores has all to do with sort of a mating ritual of guys who go out and hunt to show themselves to be intimidating to their rival males and attractive to breeding females. This was his explanation for it. I'm not entirely sure that that's the whole thing, but the thing I can say is that once the Stone Age arrived, it didn't matter anymore. Because even though you're not built to kill prey, once the Stone Age arrives, then you can capture prey, you can kill them, you can remove the hide, you can remove the meat from the bones, and once you got fire, you're onto something. But we have pre-Stone Age coronary arteries, and a pre-Stone Age intestinal tract, and pre-Stone Age cells that when we eat meat and dairy products and eggs and all these things we're not designed for, we get the problems that those will bring us. So the answer is to go back to a healthy diet. And the beauty of this is, I don't care how old you are, I don't care what kind of a hand nature has dealt you. When we put healthy foods to work, their power becomes evident almost right away, and you never know how far you can go. The only thing that I want to say, though, is that so many of us have discovered this. The key thing is to let other people know. Because the meat industry, the dairy industry, and people who sell medicines to undo the problems they cause, they are making a lot of noise. And we have got to not just be the silent teacher who's worried about the kids in the class, or the principal who doesn't say much, or the school nurse who's tired of seeing people get sick and come into the office, or people who are troubled about the healthcare costs that they're having where they work, or the member of Congress who's thinking, why are we spending so much subsidizing meat and dairy products? If all of those people get together, we're bigger than any industry. And if we make noise, we can change the health of this planet. Thank you very much.